English.com. Lesson number 1. Introducing yourself. Past tense. Questions and answers. Jane was a Yank. Was Jane British or American?
American. Jane was a Yank. She was American.
American. Jane was a Yank. Jane was an American. Was she an Australian?
No, she was not Australian. Jane was Yank. She
No,
was American.
she wasn't an Australian. Jane was a Yank. She was an American. Who was a Yank?
Jane was a Yank. She was American.
Jane was a Yank. She was an American. Jane was sitting in the restaurant alone. Was Jane sitting with a friend?
No, she wasn't. Jane was sitting in a restaurant
No, she
alone.
wasn't. Jane was sitting in a restaurant alone. Who was Jane sitting with?
She was sitting with no one. Jane was sitting
She was
in
sitting
the
with
restaurant
no one.
alone.
Jane was sitting in the restaurant alone. Was Jane sitting in a hotel?
No, Jane was sitting in the restaurant.
No, Jane was sitting in the restaurant. She had just arrived in Vietnam. She walked to a restaurant. Had she lived in Vietnam for 6 months?
No, she hasn't lived in Vietnam for 6 months.
No,
she has just
Jane
arrived
hadn't lived in Vietnam for 6
Vietnam.
months. She had just arrived in Vietnam. Did Jane walk to a restaurant?
Yes, Jane walked to a restaurant.
Yes, Jane walked to a restaurant. She walked to a restaurant. Did Jane take a taxi to a museum?
No, Jane didn't take a taxi to a museum.
No, Jane
walked
didn't
to
take a
restaurant.
taxi to a museum. She walked to a restaurant. She knew no one in Vietnam and was sitting by herself. Did Jane have many friends in Vietnam?
No, she hasn't many
No,
friends
Jane
in Vietnam.
didn't have many friends in Vietnam. She knew
She
no
knew
one
in
in
Vietnam.
Vietnam. How many people did Jane know in Vietnam?
No, she knew no one in Vietnam.
None. She knew no one in Vietnam. Why was Jane sitting alone?
She was feeling alone because she knew no one in Vietnam.
She was sitting alone because she knew no one in Vietnam. Jane was feeling a little lonely because she knew no one and had no friends in Vietnam. Why was Jane feeling lonely?
She was feeling lonely because she knew no one and
Jane
had
was
no
feeling lonely
friends in
because she
Vietnam.
knew no one and had no friends in Vietnam. Was Jane feeling lonely?
Yes, she
Yes,
was feeling
she
lonely.
was feeling lonely. Jane was feeling lonely. Was Jane feeling lonely because she had no job?
No, Jane wasn't feeling lonely because she had no job. Jane
No.
was feeling lonely
Jane was
because
feeling
she had
lonely
no one
because
and
she
had
knew no one and
friends
had
in
no
Vietnam.
friends in Vietnam. Did Jane have many friends in Vietnam?
No, she didn't have many
No,
friends in
she didn't
Vietnam.
have many friends in Vietnam. She knew no
She
one
knew
and
no one
had
and
no
had no
friends in
friends in
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Quan walked in ordered his food, and sat at the table next to Jane's. Did Quan sit outside the restaurant at a table?
No. He sat at the table next to Jane. He sat at the table next to Jane.
No. He sat at the table next to Jane's. Did Quan walk out of the restaurant?
No. Quang didn't walk out of the
No,
restaurant.
he didn't walk out of the restaurant. He
Quang
walked
walked
in,
ordered
ordered
his
his food,
and
and sat at the table next to Jane's. Where did Quan sit in the restaurant?
At the table next to Jane.
At the table next to Jane. He sat at the table next to Jane's. He began a conversation with Jane. Who began a conversation with Jane?
Quang began a conversation with Jane.
Quan. Quan started a conversation with Jane. Did he finish a conversation with Jane?
No. Quang began a conversation with Jane.
No. Quan didn't finish his conversation with Jane. He began a conversation with Jane. What did Quan begin with Jane?
A conversation. Quang should talk a
A
conversation with
conversation.
Jane.
Quan began a conversation with Jane. Quan asked Jane questions to get to know her better. Did Quan ask Jane questions to hire her for a job?
No. Quang didn't ask Jane questions to hire her for a job.
No. Quan didn't
asked
ask Jane
questions
questions
to
to
get to
hire
know
her
her
for a
better.
job. Quan asked Jane questions to get to know her better. Why did Quan ask Jane questions?
Quang asked Jane questions to get to know her better.
Quan asked Jane questions to get to know her better. Did Quan tell Jane a story to amuse Jane?
No. Quang didn't talk Jane her story.
No, Quan didn't tell Jane a story to amuse
To me
Jane.
here,
Quan asked Jane questions to get to know her better. Jane told Quan her story and why she was in Vietnam. Did Jane refuse to talk to Quan?
No, Jane didn't refuse to talk to Quang. Jane told Quang
No,
her story
Jane
and why
didn't
she was
refuse to
in
talk to
Vietnam.
Quan. Jane
She was
told
in
Quan her
Vietnam.
story and why she was in Vietnam. What did Jane tell Quan?
Her story and why she was in Vietnam.
Her story and why she was in Vietnam. Jane told Quan her story and why she was in Vietnam. Did Jane sing songs to Quan?
No, Jane didn't sing song to Quang. Jane told Quang her story
No,
and
Jane
why she
didn't sing
was in
songs to
Vietnam.
Quan. Jane told Quan her story and why she was in Vietnam.